Hello there, Steve here in Sydney. Good morning. Of the Lane Gnosis website, truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes you can get physical evidence of your divine spark being activated, and that will be followed by a magic forest experience for you over the next few weeks, which will result in an internal mentoring voice and enable you to get guidance, fighting your way through mis and disinformation, which you are all buried under, aren't you? So layman's gnosis can do that at truebluehealer.com for you. Give it a shot, it's all free. I want to talk today about a recent development where a whole lot of people have been deplatformed recently on YouTube because they are such powerful opinion leaders, and they've actually got the New World Order on the ropes because they have a sympathetic president in the White House. He has finally awoken to the fact that some of his best friends are literally facing extinction from YouTube, being removed simply because the New World Order is on the run, and in a fit of desperation they've embarked on this outrageous campaign of deleting anyone who disagrees with the globalists. Trump's already let it be known. He started rumbling from the White House that Google, Yahoo, YouTube, the whole lot of them, Facebook, are facing being broken up using monopoly laws, and that seems to be doomed to failure. But it's a good start. It's a very threatening start to the New World Order, who is actually literally on the ropes fighting for their literal footprint in media. And it means a lot to them to have control of the media, massive TV stations and that sort of thing. Now, why won't just breaking up the main media groups on the internet, breaking them up into say 17 or 20 different entities, why isn't that going to work? Because it's all been done before with the Rockefellers and it didn't work then. He was a single monolithic corporation that had massive monopolistic control of railways and all sorts of things, and was broken up into many splinter groups. And all the Rockefeller family did was put their own management into each and every one of the splinter groups. And the Rockefeller group carried on business as usual, being as mean and nasty as they were famous for. So nothing actually changed with breaking them up and saying, look, we don't have a monopoly anymore, but you still did. Because the same types of people, the same hand-picked people of ruthless mentality were put into the leadership of every one of the small corporations. So Donald Trump's first step is not going to work. I mean, even if you put, say you did break up Google and Facebook and YouTube, you broke them up into 20 different companies, you put your own management in there, well, very soon they will be infiltrated by people. There's lots of people who are professional, lifelong, full-time conspirators. They change their names. They try to deceive us into thinking that they are one of us, but they change their names and you can't tell which is which. But they are lifelong and professional and very well drilled and practiced conspirators. So you'd end up like the FDA, where the FDA is actually staffed by former Monsanto people. And what's the job of the FDA? Well, to regulate Monsanto. I don't know how to get around the problem of infiltration and the revolving door thing between private industry. That's if you make, say, all the 20 Google, Facebook groups broken up. You make them government corporations, in principle anyway, but perhaps with 51% private ownership still. But how do you vet the staff, and what do you do? How do you stop people literally infiltrating? The problem of infiltration has been pointed out over the last few years, that if you look carefully, you watch the news, you can see that numerous government departments work as if they're operated and managed by their own worst enemies. And it's true, that observation, because they have been totally infiltrated. So how do you solve that problem? Well, I think there is a way, and it's incredibly simple, and it's staring us in the face. A little hypnosis here. We're going back in time to a time, an era, an epoch where there was no internet. Can you remember that? We used to have a thing called the electric speaking trumpet, which was otherwise called a telephone. And do you ever remember, can you think of an instance where you're talking on the telephone and the phone company comes across the line and says, that's a forbidden subject. You talk about that subject any further, we're going to disconnect your telephone service. Do you remember that happening, people? Well, no, you don't, because it never happened once, did it? The truth was, phone companies are agnostic as to the content of your conversation. They just want to be paid for providing a communication channel between yourself and the other interlocutor. They really don't care whether you're plotting regicide or whatever, though there were offences you could commit using the electronic carriage service, which is what they call the telephone system, the fax system, etc. If you start sending bomb threats, that sort of thing, you start stalking people, there's penalties for that. So, but otherwise, the phone company couldn't care less what you talk about on the telephone. And that's how the telephone system worked so well. Now, the internet is really just an extension of the phone system. We all still connect to the internet via the phone system, and it could easily be argued that the internet is really just a glorified telephone communications network with lots and lots of frills added. Powerful moguls who are fabulously rich, and we've talked about the particular ethnic group that seems to let power go to their head when they get some money behind them and they believe they are born to rule and they're going to regulate everybody's conversation because, well, they're using my software, they're using my Facebook software, therefore I'm going to control everyone's conversation. I'll withhold news from them, I'll give them fake news, I'm going to manipulate every thought they have. That's a prerogative they have taken upon themselves. And it's quite immoral, quite wrong, and it should be illegal. I think we really have to go back to seeing the internet as just an electronic carriage service, and providers of the carriage service should not be allowed to connect or disconnect people's accounts just because of the content of their chatter. It's basically that. So an internet bill of rights is needed. It's as simple as that. It's not been established yet that you have basic freedoms to say what you like on the internet. Otherwise the internet's a complete waste of time. I mean, the people who put this software together, say Mark Zuckerberg, people like that, they're actually just fronts. They're young men wearing t-shirts who are put there by the military-industrial complex. Google, Yahoo, Facebook, they're all military intelligence groups gathering data. And the idea that you can start regulating everybody's conversation and their knowledge, incoming knowledge, is downright preposterous. But they've taken that upon themselves. When you think about it, it's quite preposterous for someone who just owns a bit of software to regulate your speech, your conversation, and what information you're going to get. I mean, if I produced a bit of software, or say you look at something like Telegram, which is used by hundreds of millions of people. I think it's a Russian invention or something, messaging app. Do they have the right to regulate the speech of everyone on there? Obviously they don't. They don't actually regulate it, but would they have the right? Could they start doing it? If Mark Zuckerberg bought Telegram, could he start telling everyone stop talking about subjects A, B, C and D? Because there's no law against it, it's not specifically forbidden, then they're getting away with doing it. So an Internet Bill of Rights is needed so that we take the internet down a peg or two and remind them legally with punishments that it's really just a glorified telephone service. That's the way it has to be, because the internet's become a vital lifeblood of our society. We couldn't live without it, and it's going to play an ever-increasing greater presence in our life as time goes on. I think we've got to completely dispel the notion, which is widespread, it's misinformation, that because something is privately owned, they have total control over you. That's got to be stopped. If you put your software, your system, your servers, whatever, into the public domain for public use, then you don't regulate its content. You just can't. If a bunch of academics who are very serious and want to do serious stuff, only talking to each other effectively in a kind of scientific echo chamber, that's fine. Just don't let the general public in. So you've got to have a login, a qualification, a password we will give you, and that can be done to keep the general public out. But as soon as you let the general public into your software, then you lose all right. It's like public thoroughfares. It's old English law was that if something is used by the public for a certain amount of time, then it becomes public property, and for good reason. So we've actually got a precedent in very old English law. I do remember that. That's why shopping malls close one day a year in Australia, because they've got to, otherwise the thoroughfares there become publicly owned. So they've got to close one day a year to maintain private ownership of all the entrances and walkways and driveways into shopping malls. Did you know that? And it's based on ancient English law. It's also blatantly obvious that the search algorithms that people are using and the way news is affected by algorithms, say you only get certain types of news coming into Facebook, that sort of thing, all those algorithms have to be open source, made public for inspection, and there's got to be someone you can complain to, such as a telecommunication ombudsman. We already have one in Australia. It doesn't have much to do with the internet, but it could. And I think the Americans probably need one in every state or something, or maybe it should be a federal agency, I don't know. But they're going to get a lot of complaints, and as usual, that organisation will be infiltrated by those people who are natural conspirators from the day they're born into their own ethnic community. So I don't know how you stop the telecommunication ombudsman, his organisation being utterly infiltrated. That's always going to be a problem. A partial solution is allowing only short-term tenure in the top management jobs. The problem then is you just have a pool of people ready, and the natural conspirator people will just come in under a bewildering variety of very strange Anglo-Saxon names, and or very, very common sounding Anglo-Saxon names. We all know about this, don't we? I don't know how you'd stop people being professional waiting to get their short-term contract to run the censorship organisation, which is what the telecommunication ombudsman could become. By not upholding any complaints and letting large organisations, their fellow conspirators in Facebook, etc., carry on business as usual, disconnecting people. So there's a weakness in every system that we can put together. A solution to overcome corruption in Australia is done by our welfare groups, the Welfare Government Department. They move their desk operators around every 3 weeks. So you can't go in there and get friendly help handing out government funds to your brother-in-law that you meet at the counter, and you get away with it for years and years. It was discovered that people staying in one position actually enabled corruption to proliferate. So frequent movement between jobs in an organisation is another one. That's another partial solution. Still isn't very good against very determined infiltrators that we know exist and place infiltration as, well, it's basically their religion. We all know about this, don't we? So I'm not sure what to do about the problem of infiltration. I'm wondering if we could do something with decentralisation and not having a central power. The telecommunications ombudsman, what if he was replaced by a blockchain-based machine, and every complaint was the names were changed, you were disguised from the people involved, so no one knows who the complainants really are, nor the carrier. And what if a different grand jury was put together to adjudicate the complaint? So you always had a different bunch of street people, ordinary average people doing it. You'd have to pay them, of course, it wouldn't be free, but you do notice when you get hundreds of people looking at stuff, you get very penetrating insights by the opinion leaders, and you do get a very sort of refined understanding of things by listening to, it's like a big parliament. So maybe that's a better way, and so you have like maybe 30 people are asked to look, they're randomly chosen, and to look at a complaint. Is this a legitimate complaint? Will you uphold it? Do you want to fine the communications carrier $20,000 or something, or $1 million, depending on the size of the offence? And have a different bunch of people doing it every time. Am I being a bit naive here? Do random people really understand telecommunications law? If you had telecommunication lawyers, they would be infiltrated again, wouldn't they? So I'm thinking of trying to use some kind of grand jury method. We'll have to give this some more thought, people. There must be some way of hearing complaints fairly, and the committee listening to the complaint not being stacked with infiltrators. So in summary, I'll say a solution to regulating the internet and making it a lot fairer is to remind all these electronic service carriers that they're really just glorified telephone companies. That's all they are, and they don't have the right to start picking and choosing what subjects will be discussed on a public medium. It's really that simple. And there's got to be some kind of external telecommunications ombudsman style complaint system where a different bunch of people hear it every time, hear the complaints. Otherwise you get entrenched factions in the little court, don't you? And you don't really want that, but then if you have fresh people every time, they're always going to be naive and first timers. So I hope I've given you guys something to think about.